Welcome to a revolutionary hour of business technology talk. This is Tech Talk, Managing the New Normal, with YASH Technologies and C5MI. You'll hear from the experts with the know-how to revolutionize and transform your business for a truly efficient, actionable technology transformation during both prosperous and challenging times. Now, here's your host and moderator, Bonnie D. Graham.
Introduce yourself a little more, and what are you going to talk about today?
Thanks. I'm excited to be here, guys. So like John said, my name's Denny Goad, and I manage the infrastructure managed services service line for YASH Technologies. So we bring infrastructure services to various companies. And like these guys have been talking about, you know, I get a lot of grief sometimes from my colleagues about the topic of infrastructure isn't maybe so exciting. But, you know, I want to compare infrastructure, Bonnie, to the circulatory system in our bodies. And IT is picking up all of this information from IoT, all these sensors, and we're taking that information and we're bringing it in and we're routing it throughout the business, just like our circulatory system would. And, you know, just like the electricity goes out in a storm, that's when you start to miss electricity and realize how much you appreciated it. And how many of us today are starting to appreciate infrastructure just a little bit more with everything that's going on, right?
Somebody just raised their hand in the room. I think you know him, Sachin. And Sachin, we saw that hand raise in the webinar. So, Denny, when you start relating business to the circulatory system, to the brains, the heart, the skeletal muscular system in a human being, it brings it into a different plane of reality. I hear the word infrastructure all the time. Well, we're going to talk about infrastructure. Well, and you really wonder, is it just a buzzword that has infra 4 syllables and most people can spell it? But I like that you're breaking it down. So go ahead, tell us more.
Yeah, so like I said, from an infrastructure perspective, we are really responsible for gathering that information, that data, storing it, and getting it out to the right people across the networks. And in this time during the pandemic, the network just got a lot bigger. I mean, we had some people working from home, but it just expanded from there. So like John said, I've got 4 things that you must absolutely walk away with today. If nothing else, pay attention to these 4 things because they're what's going to be changing from an infrastructure perspective due to this pandemic. So Bonnie, the first one is working from home. Everybody's familiar with the work from home phenomenon that we're seeing.
We're doing it. We're living it. We're living it, Denny.
Right? We're doing it here.
What are we doing here? You're not running to Sapphire next week. We're all doing it, so we're talking. But doesn't everybody in the room love the wallpaper behind us, the Tech Talk banner? Go ahead, Denny. I had to say that.
Number 2, cybersecurity. So we'll talk about cybersecurity. Number 3, disaster recovery and business continuation planning go hand in hand. So we'll cover those. And then the last one is the cloud. But Bonnie, before I go deep into each of those 4, what I want to talk about for a minute is just take a moment and think about what was life like over 20 years ago before the events of 9/11.
Well, it was different from before 9/11. It was different from before now. It was different in 20 years ago. Denny, you're taking us back to 2000. If I remember, Y2K was rearing the threat of an ugly thing happening to the whole world. I was on a team at a software developer in Long Island, New York, and we were working almost 24 hours a day trying to get ready for clients to live through Y2K. So we've had some of these quote unquote disruptions. Denny, so what are we talking about today?
Yeah, so, well, and if you think about the events of 9/11 and how they've changed our daily lives, Bonnie, you know, I think of the airline industry a lot, and I think about travel. I think about how I didn't have to arrive at the airport 2 hours early before an international flight. I think about the impact to the whole security process around travel today globally. We didn't have to take our shoes off. We didn't have all the pat downs that we have. I can remember going and sending my loved ones off, you know, or meeting them at the gate, right? I'd give them that last hug and kiss, I'd send them off. And now we can't do that anymore. And the one that brings it home for me, Bonnie, is TSA PreCheck. What I like about TSA PreCheck is even after 9/11, in the times like this right now, we knew things were going to change. We were calling for maybe more travel security. We've got to keep an eye on that. But who 19, 20 years ago thought, at some point in time, we're going to have a system where people pay to get through security faster. And that's what we're talking about with the thought leadership here today. YASH Technologies and C5MI, we want to help our businesses get ahead, and we want to help them think about the impact that this pandemic is going to have, Bonnie.
You mentioned one of your topics coming up, Denny, is disaster recovery, and that's actually a very dire way to put on Derek. I was not using your last name in vain, Derek Dyer. Sorry about that. Pun not intended. In a way, disaster recovery is what every business is looking for right now. It's not whether the water came into the factory or whether something happened to the roof or whether all the machines shut down or the robots went nuts. We're in a sense. I just thought about that. So Denny, take it away. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, and when you think about, you just mentioned what everybody's trying to figure out now. I mean, it's business disruption, and at YASH we've been having a lot of conversations with a lot of different companies, a lot of leaders in IT, and I'm often asked, I'd say the one question that's the least common denominator is they lean in, what's everybody else doing, right? What do you see as a common theme here? So I will walk through these 4 items, Bonnie, but I want to talk about how, it's not a one size fits all. And maybe the analogy what I would use is if you're cleaning a house, and if I'm a house cleaner, I've got the same tools just like I would have a structure perspective. And I'm going to go to one house, I've got my scrubbing hands, I've got my brain for organizing, my disinfectants. But that house, I've got 4 kids, Bonnie, so my house is a mess. When they come in, they're going to have to pick everything up before they start disinfecting the surface areas, right? But, I'm sure if we go to your house, it's spick and span, and it's a different approach that we're going to take before we clean the house. And so that's the analogy that I give to a lot of our clients around everybody's running infrastructure. Everybody's cleaning the house, but how we approach it is different. So what we do at YASH Technologies is we look at what vertical are you in? Are you in manufacturing? Are you in pharmaceuticals? Are you in, and are you in construction? And then we take that measured against, where's your business right now? Are you struggling just to get payroll? Do you have growth plans? And then we map these things to that to try to help you get ahead, Bonnie. So just getting right to it, the first item that I'd like to cover is this phenomenon of working from home and the impact that it has on infrastructure.
Okay, so we're ready. We're ready.
Yeah, I bet a lot of you listening have, you think back just a matter of weeks to the struggle that you had here when we were trying to get the workforce going home. So we've heard stories of people going out and buying massive amount of laptops. We've heard stories about companies letting people in just to get their desktop unhooked and bringing it home, right? So different ways, ramping up our virtual desktop infrastructure. So with respect to work from home, virtual desktop infrastructure is something that I want to talk about, Bonnie, and not only VDI, but using virtual desktop infrastructure in the cloud so that we can go, and everybody that had to go out and in that short run make a purchase of laptops, they did it and they're getting by. But after everybody goes back to work, now they've got those laptops and those are assets that they have to keep. With the VDI infrastructure in the cloud, they can ramp up and then they can ramp back down, right? And so that's a good way to adjust and stay ahead of that cost a little bit.
Okay. So Denny, when you're talking about the cloud, you're talking about shared services, shared resources, shared applications where you don't have to keep upgrading something. You don't have to keep a new iteration. It's just coming to you from your membership or your participation in cloud services. So on a practical basis, what does that mean to, let's say, XYZ manufacturer, and they had to send their entire back office staff home. They did or didn't buy new laptops. And now you're talking about VDI in the cloud. So what would be the benefit for that?
So most enterprises, most companies have a standard base load. We talk about a standard. Everybody, when they turn on their laptop or their desktop, they all have the same set of applications. If they're engineers, they have the same set of applications if they're in marketing. And so this allows us, when people go home and they are maybe using their laptop or their iPad, they can get in and get access to that enterprise desktop. Whereas today, there are a lot of people that are just using remote email and using a web browser and doing the best they can to get by, if that makes sense, Bonnie.
Sure it does. So what's next?
Yeah, so the next one, so I bet I know what's keeping all the security people awake at night. If you think about that old adage, you're only as strong as your weakest link, right? So we've just added a bunch of insecure links to this IT infrastructure setup. So mobile and working from home, it's always been there, but it's not been embraced to the magnitude that it has been in the last few weeks. So there's really been a massive shift. All this work that companies do to harden their networks, that's really now including people's home networks. And there's two aspects to the home network that I want to cover, Bonnie, and that's, think about the router that you're using today in your home. It's in your closet, it's in your basement. Now think about why you or why your employees decided to purchase that router. When was the last time it was upgraded? I purchased mine because my kids were getting older and they were streaming Netflix on multiple TVs. I wasn't thinking about enterprise security at the time. When was the last time that everybody upgraded the firmware on their router to make sure that they had the most latest and secure environment, right? And so that's something that we need to consider. And again, that's something that YASH can come in and help you create a managed environment, just like we have from an enterprise perspective. Now, the second point to cybersecurity, Bonnie, we often hear about the human element to cybersecurity. And we think about when we go into our enterprise place of work, we're badging in, we're giving a nod to that security guard, we're maybe even walking through a turnstile or metal detectors. And now the enterprise just got massively extended out to our homes. So now, the bad guys, the cybersecurity folks that want to get in, that are a risk, now there's no badge to get into my front door. There's no turnstile. But yet my enterprise network is here, right? You knock on my door with a smiling face, I might invite you in for some coffee. And they can get a look around to see, you know what, he's still using that 12-year-old Linksys router. Now we know how to get in. And so they can gather a lot of information. And again, YASH can help advise on what to do about that.
Denny, this is all so practical. This is not high-level woo-woo stuff. This makes sense to me. And if you think about it, many people say I can clean my own house, but the day you have a professional cleaning team came in, and it took me a year before I figured out to do that here in my new house in Durham, North Carolina. What a difference. They took care of stuff that it was obvious, but I didn't want to do it. I didn't have time. I didn't look in that corner. I didn't clean out that closet. Same thing. You're talking about routers and firmware. And if the provider of these services, of these devices, doesn't send you a time to upgrade or check automatic updates, we don't think about it. So now you're right. We've brought our companies into so many homes where before maybe you let somebody take a laptop home on the weekend and then they brought it back. The companies have gone home basically to maybe 10,000 homes, and who knows? It just makes sense to me. So go on, keep on. Talk more.
Well, and we're hearing all kinds of anecdotal evidence that this movement is here to stay. And that's one of the reasons why it was so important for me to talk about it today. So as far as Bunny, a couple of us today are going to talk about, another phenomenon that will occur, which is we're all granted some leniency as we deal with this. We're all, it's not normal to run in and get your desktop, unplug it and bring it home. That's the sort of thing that, we're granted leniency like that. There's also a couple of areas of leniency when it comes to being prepared for a disaster like this. So, if you think about, a lot of states are working on their plans to go back to work. What if you get back to work and 4 months later, you've got a colleague who tests positive? Is your workplace going to now shut down and you're going to go home again? And I guarantee you, those of us in infrastructure are going to be expected to be better prepared this time than last time. So that really, there's two sides to being prepared there. There's the disaster recovery from an infrastructure perspective, and then there's helping the business to be ready with their business continuity plan. So YASH goes into clients and we help them. We'll run tabletop exercises. And a lot of businesses do this already today. A lot of businesses don't. Their disaster recovery plans are good for gathering dust. This is a good wake-up call, and I think they've already gotten that message. But I would ask you to think about the scenarios that are in all of your DRs and BCPs today. Most of them are fires, earthquakes, tornadoes. They're catastrophic events, but they're very short in nature and they're done. And as soon as they're over with in a matter of seconds or minutes, everybody can descend on that location and they can help put things back together again. Here we've got the exact opposite. It's stretched out over time. Everybody's ready, willing, and able to help, but they can't get there. And so not only, you absolutely should add this pandemic scenario to your BCP, but what other scenarios like this should be added that need to be? So that's another one. That's the third nugget, Bonnie, is to really consider that. And there won't be the same level of forgiveness next time that we go into this.
So Denny, we might say it's time to reimagine disaster recovery. Disaster. Now, a different D word is disruption. It doesn't need to be disaster for companies that perhaps didn't do their digital transformation. They weren't ready. Maybe they weren't sure about the investment. Maybe their IT department wasn't ready. Maybe they just didn't have it all together. And those who did may be more ready. But disaster recovery, disruption recovery, or disruption renewal. Maybe we need to have a new, more optimistic way of looking at it. So go ahead, Denny. What's next?
Yep. So the last one along the same lines, Bonnie, which is cost. We've all been granted a little bit of leniency here. We've spent some money to help get through this, but the next time management isn't going to be as lenient. So YASH Technologies can come in and help you be better prepared. So I said cloud was the last thing. And cloud is, I know everybody's been beaten up over cloud and heard about it, for the last 10 years or more. But truly, if you look around, the businesses that had their infrastructure in the cloud fared better. Those that needed to ramp up could, those that needed to ramp down could. And YASH is very practiced. I mentioned at the beginning the different verticals. We operate in a lot of different verticals. And we really pride ourselves, and that's kind of why C5MI was born, is we pride ourselves in really getting to know your business and helping you get the most out of it. So whether you're just, again, cost savings or speed, we'll help you leverage the cloud so that you can get through this and deal with this better going forward, Bonnie. So it's all about being ready for the next business disruption.
Thank you for tuning in to Tech Talk, Managing the New Normal with YASH Technologies and C5MI. To keep the conversation going, tweet your questions and comments to YASH_tech or email john.gretter@yash.com. That's john.gretter@yash.com. We look forward to hearing from you.